Hello everyone, welcome to Digital Communication Tutorials. In this video, I am going to derive the expression for average probability of error for quadriphase shift keying. You should note I have explained the transmitter and receivers of QPSK in my previous video. So I would highly suggest you to watch that video first before you watch this. If you already watched that, let us continue with the derivation. In one of my previous videos, I had discussed binary phase shift keying technique. In a binary PSK system, the information carried by the transmitted signal was contained in the phase of the same. QPSK system can be regarded as an extension of binary PSK system. Therefore, just like binary PSK, in a QPSK modulation scheme, the information carried by the transmitted signal is once again contained in the phase. In a binary PSK system, the number of symbols were 2 and therefore the phase of the carrier took one of the two values, that is 0 and pi. On the other hand, in a QPSK, the number of input symbols are 4 and therefore the phase of the carrier takes on one of the 4 equally spaced values such as pi by 4, 3 pi by 4, 5 pi by 4 and 7 pi by 4. One good representation of the QPSK signal is given by Si of t equals square root of 2e by t cos of 2 pi fct plus 2I minus 1 into pi by 4, where t takes on the value between 0 to capital T and Si of t is 0 elsewhere. Here, since we are talking about QPSK, I takes on the values 1, 2, 3 and 4. Further, capital E represents the transmitted signal energy per symbol, capital T denotes the symbol duration and Fc is given by Nc divided by capital T, where Nc is some fixed integer. We should note, in a QPSK system, each possible value of phase corresponds to a unique pair of bits, which is also called as a debit. For example, we may choose the set of phase values to represent the gray encoded bits that are given by 10, 00, 01 and 11. Using the trigonometric identity, I can expand equation 1, particularly this part which is in the form of cos of a plus b into cos a cos b minus of sin a sin b. Here I have given that expansion. So, cos a cos b minus of sin a sin b. Once again, I varies from 1 to 4 and t takes on the value between 0 to capital T. To obtain the 4 QPSK signals, I can substitute I is equals to 1, 2, 3, 4 and the value of the corresponding phase will be represented here. In fact, I have shown those equations in this slide. So, S1 of t is obtained by substituting I is equals to 1 into this equation. So, it will be square root of 2e by t cos of 2I minus 1 is 1. So, it will be cos pi by 4 into cos 2 pi fct minus of square root of 2e by t sin pi by 4 into sin 2 pi fct, which is given here. To obtain S2 of t, I have to simply substitute I is equals to 2 and the rest of the equations are obtained by substituting I is equals to 3 and 4 respectively. Now, by carefully observing this set of equations, we have two observations to make. The first observation is the QPSK system has two orthonormal basis functions which are phi 1 of t and phi 2 of t. The form of the orthonormal basis functions can be obtained by identifying the common term in each of these equations. So, if you note clearly, square root of 2 by t into cos 2 pi fct is common in the first term of each equation. Very similarly, square root of 2 by t sin 2 pi fct is common in the second term of each equation. So, they will form the orthonormal basis functions. You should note square root of e should not be taken as a part of the basis function because it represents the energy of the corresponding signal. Therefore, the orthonormal basis functions for the QPSK system is given by phi 1 of t is square root of 2 by t cos 2 pi fct, phi 2 of t equals square root of 2 by t sin 2 pi fct. Further, as we can see from this slide, there are 4 message points and each message point will have a pair of coordinates in the constellation diagram. In this equation 5, we have represented the signal vector in a generic term given by Si and the elements of the signal vector will be Si1 and Si2. The form of SI1 and SI2 can be obtained from equation 2 here, where the signaling part apart from the basis function part will become the coordinate. That is square root of e into cos 2i minus 1 into pi by 4 will become SI1, and square root of e into sin 2i minus 1 into pi by 4 will become SI2, which is given here. These message points are given in the table here. Note that we have SI1 and SI2 representing the coordinate of each of the message point. As said previously, we are going to use the gray encoded set of bits for representing QPSK symbols. So, the QPSK symbols are given here. Then we have the phase of the QPSK signal. As we know, the first signal has a phase of pi by 4, second one is 3 pi by 4. So, these phase informations are given here. And by substituting I is equals to 1, 2, 3 and 4 and simplifying this particular term, we will obtain the correct values of SI1 and SI2 as shown in the table here. Therefore, by analyzing this table carefully, we understand that a QPSK system is characterized by having a two-dimensional constellation diagram, which is capital N equals to 2. You should note N is also equal to the number of basis functions. Further, the number of message points in the QPSK constellation diagram is 4 because it is the number of input symbols in a QPSK system. Now, let us move on to the constellation diagram. We will identify the coordinates of each of the message point and they are represented in the corresponding positions as shown in the diagram here. For example, message point 1 is located in the fourth quadrant, message point 2 in the third quadrant, message point 3 in the second quadrant, and lastly message point 4 in the first quadrant. Please note the polarity of the coordinates SI1 and SI2 decide the position of the corresponding message point in the constellation diagram. Now, to realize the decision rule for the detection of the transmitted data sequence, we need to partition the signal space into 4 regions because there are 4 message points. The first region will be the set of points that are closest to the message point 1. The second region is a set of all points that are closest to the message point 2, and similarly we have 2 more regions for message point 3 and 4 respectively. Let us denote each of these regions as region Z1, Z2, Z3 and Z4 respectively. Let us now move on towards the receiver part. Let the noisy received signal be represented by x of t, which is given by Si of t, which represents the signal part, plus W of t, where W of t is a sample function of a white Gaussian noise process of mean 0 and power spectral density n0 by 2. Since there are 2 orthonormal basis functions at the transmitter, the observation vector x at the receiver will have 2 elements that are given by x1 and x2. The equations for x1 and x2 are written in accordance with the second equation of the Gram-Schmidt, which is for the coefficient Sij. We should note Sij is equals to integral 0 to Tb Si of t into phi j of t dt. So, x1 will be integral 0 to capital T x of t into phi 1 of t dt, and x2 is equals to integral 0 to capital T x of t into phi 2 of t dt. Let us now substitute x of t as Si of t plus W of t in these equations here as well as here. Now, please note Si of t is the signaling part and each signaling part has 2 elements, which is Si1 and Si2. So, Si1 has to be substituted for x1 and Si2 has to be substituted for x2. So, after simplifying this, we will obtain x1 as square root of e cos 2i minus 1 into pi by 4, which is equals to Si1 plus W1. Very similarly, x2 will be Si2 plus W2. Therefore, we can now state that the elements x1 and x2 are sample values of independent Gaussian random variables with mean value equal to square root of e cos 2i minus 1 into pi by 4 and minus square root of e into sin 2i minus 1 into pi by 4 respectively, and a common variance of n0 by 2, which in fact is given here. So, mean of x1 is the first part of x1 equation and mean of x2 is the first part of x2 equation, and the variance of both x1 and x2 will be the same, which is equals to n0 by 2. With that, now move on to the decision rule. The decision rule is simply to decide in favor of signal S1 of t if the received signal point associated with the observation vector x falls inside region Z1. Otherwise, we can decide in favor of signal S2 of t if the received signal point associated with the observation vector x falls inside region Z2. Similarly, we can construct the other two decision rules for S3 of t and S4 of t respectively. In making these decisions, the system may sometimes create an error. We call it as an erroneous decision. For example, assume signal S4 of t is transmitted, but the noise W of t in the channel is such that the received signal point falls outside region Z4. Please note, when signal S4 of t is transmitted, if the received signal point falls outside region Z4, it is an error. We note that owing to the symmetry of the decision regions, the probability of interpreting the received signal point correctly is the same regardless of which particular signal was transmitted. So, we will now assume that signal S4 of t was transmitted. The receiver will then make a correct decision if the received signal point x lies inside region Z4. Please note, this is for a correct decision. Accordingly, for the correct decision when signal S4 of t is transmitted, the elements of the received signal vector x1 and x2 must both be positive. We will understand this by looking into the constellation diagram. Please note the message point 4, which represents signal S4 of t, is in the first quadrant, in which both the x and y axis have positive values. So, if the received signal point falls inside region Z4, then the coordinates of the received signal point, which are x1 and x2, must both be positive. So, that is what we have written here. The correct decision for signal S4 of t will happen when both the elements x1 and x2 of the received signal vector are positive. This also means that the probability of correct decision, which is represented by Pc, will equal the conditional probability of the joint event of x1 greater than 0 and x2 greater than 0 when signal S4 of t is transmitted. Now, you should understand why we call it as a joint event, because previously we have said the elements x1 and x2 are sample values of the random variable capital X1 and capital X2, and by taking the concept of response of bank of correlators, we find that they are statistically independent. So, the probability of x1 greater than 0 and x2 greater than 0, given they both are statistically independent, is equal to the product of the individual probabilities of having x1 greater than 0 as well as x2 greater than 0. This is what is given here. Since x1 and x2 are independent, the probability of correct decision Pc is equal to the product of the conditional probability that x1 is greater than 0 and x2 is greater than 0 given signal S4 of t is transmitted. Further, we also note that the random variables capital X1 and capital X2 are Gaussian random variables with a conditional mean equal to root e by 2 and a variance equal to n naught by 2. So, with this information, now we are ready to write the conditional probability density equations for the correct decision Pc, which is given here. Please note, this is a product of the probability that x1 is greater than 0 and the probability that x2 is greater than 0. The probability that x1 is greater than 0 is given by the first part of the equation here, and since x1 is a Gaussian random variable, I have given the equation for Gaussian distribution here. So, the probability of correct decision is equals to integral 0 to infinity 1 divided by square root of 2 pi into variance of x1 multiplied by exponential of minus 1 by 2 into variance of x1 multiplied by x1 minus mean of x1 square. The same applies for x2 as well. So, let us now substitute for variance of x1 and mean of x1. We have previously said the mean of x1 and x2 are root e by 2, whereas variance of x1 and x2 are n naught by 2. So, I will substitute that into equation here. So, variance of x1 is substituted by n naught by 2 in all 4 places, and mean of x1 is given by plus root e by 2. Mean of x2 is once again plus root e by 2. Let us now simplify this equation to obtain integral 0 to infinity 1 divided by square root of pi into n naught exponential of minus x1 minus root e by 2 whole square divided by n naught into dx1 multiplied by Now we have the same for x2 here. We should note the first integral in the RHS is the conditional probability of event x1 greater than 0, and the second integral is the conditional probability of the event x2 greater than 0. Right. Just like all our previous equations, now it is time to change the variable from x to z. Please note, I have taken the square root of the contents of the exponential term except for the negative symbol in both the first and second integral to be z. I can assume for time being x1 and x2 are equal. Having changed the variable from x to z, now we need to find new integral limits. This can be done by putting old integral limits into this equation and finding new values for z. The old integral limits are 0 and infinity. So when I substitute x1 or x2 is equals to 0 into this, z equals to minus of square root of e by 2n naught. On the other hand, when I substitute x is equals to infinity, z is equals to infinity. Lastly, we need to also find dx1 or dx2. Now, since I have assumed x1 equals to x2, I simply will find dx, which is done by differentiating this equation. So, I will find dz by dx. We note that dz by dx is equals to differentiation of this term. Since the second term in the numerator is a constant, what remains in the RHS is only differentiation of x1 divided by square root of n naught. So, since we are differentiating with respect to x, differentiation of x1 or x2 will produce 1. So, dz by dx is equals to 1 divided by square root of n naught. Rearranging this, I will find dx equals to square root of n naught into dz. I will substitute all these values into my previous equation, which is equation 9, and I have written the new equation here. So, the probability of correctness is equals to, please note I have assumed x1 is equals to x2. So, this complete term can be squared because x1 is equals to x2, which is what is given in this equation. So, I will write for the first term and then I will simply put a square to accommodate the second term as well. So, the new limits of integral are square root of minus e by 2n naught and infinity, which are given here. Then we have 1 divided by square root of pi into n naught, which is written as it is, no change, multiplied by exponential of, since I have taken the square root of the contents of the exponential term except for the negative symbol as z, this complete term will become minus z square, which is written here, multiplied by, we have dx1 or dx simply, which is equals to square root of n naught into dz, which is written here. So, since we have a square root of n naught in the numerator here and 1 in the denominator here, we will cancel them out, and therefore, the expression for the probability of correct decision is given by 1 divided by square root of pi integral square root of minus e by 2n naught to infinity exponential of minus z square dz whole square. Please note the square because it is combining these two terms. Now, we are going to compare this equation with the standard equation of the complementary error function, which is given by ERFC of u is equals to 2 by root pi integral u to infinity exponential of minus z square dz. In all our previous derivations for the probability of error, we have compared the probability of error equation with ERFC equation. However, here we are comparing the probability of correctness equation with the ERFC equation. So, ERFC, which is complementary error function, is equal to 1 minus of error function. So, ERFC is equals to 1 minus of ERF. So, I can now write the contents of the squared term, which is given here, equals to 1 minus of 1 by 2 into ERFC of square root of e by 2n naught. You have to simply write the lower limit of integral here. However, the sign should not be considered. So, here it will be square root of e by 2n naught. Now, I will substitute RHS of equation 13 into equation 11, which is for this term, to obtain probability of correctness equals 1 minus 1 by 2 ERFC of square root of e by 2n naught whole square. Now, this is in the form of a minus b whole square, which is equals to a square plus b square minus 2ab, which is given here. We know that the probability of correctness is equal to 1 minus probability of error. So, the probability of error is equals to 1 minus of probability of correctness. I will now substitute the RHS of equation 14 into this part, and I will simplify to obtain the expression for the average probability of symbol error for QPSK system as ERFC square root of e by 2n naught minus 1 by 4 into ERFC square of square root of e by 2n naught. In the case when E by 2n naught is very larger compared to 1, the second term in the equation 15 can be ignored. So, the average probability of error for coherent QPSK will now be PE approximately equal to ERFC of square root of E divided by 2n naught. It should be noted that this equation is derived assuming signal S4 of t was transmitted. However, we will obtain the same exact expression irrespective of which signal was transmitted. So, this expression will in fact stand for the average probability of error for QPSK system. Lastly, before we conclude, we know that in a QPSK system, each symbol is made up of 2 bits. We call it as a D-bit in fact. So, the symbol energy of a QPSK system, which is capital E, is twice that of the bit energy, which is EB. Let us now substitute E is equals to 2EB into this equation, which is given here. And lastly, the equation for the average probability of symbol error of a coherent QPSK system in terms of bit energy is given by probability of error is approximately equal to ERFC of square root of EB by N naught. Right. That is about the derivation of the average probability of error for QPSK system. If you like this video, kindly press that like button and subscribe to my channel for more videos on digital communication. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.